All right. Welcome to Revolution Network. This is Dr. Jason Dean, and I have a returning guest. So I'm going to let everyone know this is Robert David Steele, and I follow him pretty routinely. I watch his membership. I go to his membership site every single week. I will even double check sometimes during the week to see if he's dropped anything else because it's so informational and educational. I appreciate it. Robert, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. And let me just make the point that the reason my stuff is so good is because it's done by everybody else. I channel good people into my website.
It's as this whole movement grows and I become more and more optimistic about it every day because of what's happening. And we're going to dive into the election stuff right away because I would like to get your take on some of how the technical stuff works because we've never been in a situation, but it grows quickly and there's more people working and digging in this movement now than I've ever seen before. And there's truly a great awakening happening of some form or fashion or another. I mean, it's pretty impressive. As we dive in, this election, now, I'm in that moment where I'm like, we are in a time in history that no one has ever seen before. I think elections have been stolen for, if not decades, centuries. But we are now, I mean, this is world changing. Can you give me a background on what you understand about this from your background?
Sure. And let me give a tip of the hat to Mike Flynn because he's the one who conceptualized the whole idea of digital soldiers and online citizen journalists. Although I started the open source intelligence movement, and Flynn and I are of one mind on the importance of this. What I think General Flynn and President Trump set in motion when President Trump first came in was the ultimate sting operation. And the presidential order on elections essentially mandated that there would be watermarks on all ballots so that legal ballots could be sorted out from illegal ballots. And the president also mandated that all elections should be auditable, not just recountable. So he changed the rules of the game. And the Democrats did not realize that he was letting them walk into a trap. Now, I also want to give a tip of the hat to Admiral Rogers, because when who deserves the Medal of Freedom, as does General Flynn, when Admiral Rogers went up to see Donald Trump, I think he set the stage for the National Security Agency being a public resource. Now, I got Ben Garrison to do a cartoon on how Bill Binney was very angry about NSA spying on everybody. That was the top half of the cartoon. But the bottom half of the cartoon, at my suggestion, was Donald Trump smiling at Bill Binney and say, yeah, but we got everything on them too. And it shows the plutocratic bankers and all of this. Let me say without any equivocation, President Trump has every email, every text, every voice call, every game chat, and every banking transaction, including all offshore banks, going back 10 years, maybe 15. Okay. Now, Nancy Pelosi is shitting in her panties because the president has every criminal conversation Nancy Pelosi has ever made. And I don't think she's going to trial. I don't think she's going to jail. I think she's going to get out of the way because if she doesn't get out of the way, the president's going to release 5 telephone conversations, which is he is authorized to declassify anything. He will release 5 telephone conversations that will cause Nancy Pelosi to shrivel up and die.
Yeah, it's funny Nancy Pelosi. So is there anybody who really likes her other than her family and some people in San Francisco?
Sure look, this is a woman. This is a woman who's worth $100 million after 30 years on a government salary. Okay, I mean, she's in my view, she is as crooked as it gets. And Chuck Schumer Chuck Schumer, in my view, is a traitor. He has always been about Israel first. And I'm a son of New York. If I lived in New York, I certainly would consider Chuck Schumer a traitor to New York. Look, the bottom line here is, and Sidney Powell has assured the public that we have all the evidence we need. I have some concerns about Rudy Giuliani, who has been too close to the Red Mafia, the deep state. But I'm hoping for the best. bottom line here is I think President Trump will win easily the Electoral College. And although I'm personally looking at 291 votes, people like Newt Gingrich are still saying 324. And a number of House seats are expected to shift in California. I'm hoping that the Virginia Senate election goes to Gade, Gade. He's an amputee and a war veteran. I believe he won the Senate election by 57%, and Mark Warner stole it from him. So there's a lot of justice yet to be done. Where I think we're at now is in the public education phase. So there's no question in my, oh, and I didn't mention this. I've been talking about this with some technical people. Apparently, not only were the watermarks geospatially trackable, which is astonishing, but I have such a thing on the back of my cell phone. All the cell phones near the ballots were trackable. I have a photo on my website showing all the cell phones in and around the White House. And there are other photos showing cell phones in and around the Pentagon. So basically, I believe the administration was able to get NSA positioned to include special signals intelligence teams in each of 16 core target states, so that we literally have a map of how all the ballots moved and what cell phones were near the ballots. This is not intended to go to trial. This is intended to bring people in and basically say, listen, shithead, we've got you. Now, you either give us a full confession, which is starting to happen, by the way, all across this country, like the chief of police in Philadelphia, all across this country, people are starting to say, oh boy. And they're saying, okay, let's make a deal. And I believe that is going to be happening for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think there's going to be some good news at Thanksgiving, some more good news at Christmas. And I think that after the president is confirmed as reelected, you are going to see a ton of resignations from Congress, and he will be able to reshape Congress even more.
That's impressive. And I want to add, because you mentioned the name, and I'm a very happily married man, but I have a giant professional crush on Sidney Powell. She is the most badass female I think I've ever seen. What do you think she's working on right now when she says release the Kraken?
Well, we actually had that conversation by email. And let me point out that Sydney has lost some of her baby fat during this last few months. She's looking skinnier and she's looking meaner and tougher. I funded a Ben Garrison cartoon with General Flynn and Sidney Powell with her pearls holding a dog named Justice, who had treed Obama and Comey and Brennan and so forth. I think Sidney Powell's a goddess. We talked about going after the media, and I'm the one who brought to her attention the Abe Lincoln use of an executive order to arrest editors and writers who were spreading lies and sedition. Now, Trump has not yet used the Insurrection Act, but he could. And I will say with absolute certainty that every owner, editor, and author at Associated Press and the New York Times and the Washington Post and elsewhere who has continued to tell lies about the election fraud is criminally culpable. This is a RICO conspiracy. These people could go to jail. Now, I'm huge on Truth and Reconciliation. I think the president is whom I don't know personally, is a merciful, pragmatic transactionist. Jack Welch said after meeting the president, talking to this guy's like talking to a peer. And this is Jack Welch, Neutron Jack, the greatest businessman on the planet. So Donald Trump is up there at a strategic level. So I don't think he's really out to put a lot of people in jail. I think he's out to clean up the system and tell them, look, get out of the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I stumbled upon a video yesterday where Roseanne Barr, of all people, was interviewing Donald Trump like back in the late 90s at a restaurant. And if you watch that interview, you cannot but love what Donald Trump is today and what he's doing. I mean, it's like he's literally cleaning up the entire system now. Does he know, when you talk about the $100 to $200 trillion in assets that Wall Street is essentially have from a fraud standpoint, does he know about that? How would that work?
Well, let me say that I think the president got $17 trillion from Wall Street. as part of a very early deal. And I just sent out a tweet that I sent to the president and to a couple of other people, including Dan Scavino and Dan Borgino. He's left money on the table, unless he's much smarter than I am and he's already got the 100 trillion. But based on my working with Wes Christian and the lawyers who funded the naked short selling website, I have a website called stopnakedshortselling.org, and the tiny URL is 100-trillion. And they have documented through over 300 cases that Wall Street, particularly Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, and JP Morgan, and Credit Suisse, and Deutsche Bank, and UBS, and lesser outfits like Citadel, they have stolen $100 trillion in the last 10 years by selling counterfeit shares that are not real and not giving money, and then working to destroy the company so that it becomes a perfect crime. Because in the law, once the company's destroyed, the shareholders have no legal claim against the Wall Street thieves. And I paid for a couple of Ben Garrison cartoons that are truly excellent that are at the website 100-trillion if you go the tiny URL route. Now, my sense is that Donald Trump is a genius and knows very well that Wall Street has been laundering money and has been stealing money. I'm not sure he has the level of detail that Wes Christian has. I also have limited confidence in William Barr and his RICO people. William Barr, you have to remember, used to be a criminal. He was Bill Casey's handler, creating Bill Clinton the criminal. Okay, Barr was the guy that Casey would send down to talk to Bill Clinton when Bill Clinton was being groomed to be president after first being the criminal governor of Arkansas. All right. Now, Barr has not impressed me, although there's a lot I don't know. Barr and Giuliani and Rye, for me, well, first off, Ryan Haspel should be fired. Barr and Giuliani should be brought to the woodshed and said, listen, you better show me some balls or you're out of here. Because right now, Giuliani is playing a touchy-feely with these lawsuits. He's doing civil lawsuits rather than criminal RICO lawsuits, and he knows the difference. So I'm waiting for Giuliani to show me some balls.
That's actually really it's interesting how you go about that. It seems like the only one who's actually hitting hard is Powell.
Yeah.
And she just doesn't hold anything back. Now, I think I saw.
Be worried about. Let me say, I have not discussed this with Sydney, and she has not discussed it with me. But I've seen several favorable references to her possibly being the next director of the FBI or the next attorney general. I personally think she should be one of our future Supreme Court justices, even though she's over the normal age of in the 40s. I think Sidney Powell is the only person who has taken on corrupt judges and prosecutors in a serious way, to include her book, License to Steal. Silicon Valley, the mainstream media, and all of the governors and people who stole this election should be very, very worried about the possibility of Sidney Powell becoming the next director of the FBI or the next attorney general. And I will tell you what I told her in an email. I said, the FBI and DOJ have been castrated by Congress. What you do to get around this is you go out and you bring in 1,000 to 2,000 retired FBI officers from 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, who know what they know how to do it. And so my interpretation of Unleash the Kraken is really about what's Sidney Powell going to do next.
Very, very, very fascinating. I was watching a clip today with Jack Dorsey of Twitter with Ted Cruz, and they are so I would say disconnected, but they're not. They know exactly what's going on. I saw another article where Jeff Bezos is unloading billions of dollars possibly worth of stocks. Is it possible that either he flipped, or is it also possible that can the president basically confiscate whatever he wants with whoever who was included in this situation? Because I mean, Amazon's big tech, and I don't know how that works, but what's your feelings on that?
Well, first off, I think Bezos is cashing out. Second off, unless you can prove fraud and conspiracy, you have no grounds for confiscation. Third off, I know based on my own virtual chief technical officer and others that Bezos has been stealing from his clients. He's basically, the clients have stovepipe data. And I was the capstone speaker at the Amazon Development Conference in 2007. And Amazon promptly stole the first half of my ideas and patented them. And they ignored the second half of my ideas, which are actually more important, which was about sense making and empowering people and stuff. And anyone who wants to see the briefing I gave Amazon in 2007 can just go to phi-beta-iota.net and look up Amazon the movie. All right. And I hold Bezos no ill will. I mean, he's done some genius stuff. And frankly, the books that I'm publishing would not be possible without Amazon. But the reality,
what was that book? Let me know what that book is so that people can go get it.
Well, they can go to Robert David Steele and see all of my books, but this book is by Joaquim Hagopian, and it's one of 5 pedophilia books that are setting the stage for a movie that will help the president educate the public on how Satanism, satanic ritual abuse, child torture and murder, and pedophilia are all part of the deep state upper crust. And it's also how they blackmail judges and prosecutors down at the bottom. But no, my best books are on reinventing intelligence, reinventing national security, and reinventing engineering. But the bottom line here is the entire social media system now is not worth saving. It's very old technology, very corrupt technology, and very it lacks integrity. For example, in Google today, a kid at Google can go digitally assassinate a business they don't like, and nobody at Google's going to notice. And the business has nowhere they can go to get remedy. Okay. The same is true of Twitter, Facebook. Now, this is also true at NSA. Contractors, the FBI and NSA employees are using NSA to stalk their girlfriends and to settle grudges and stuff like that. So I wrote the first warning letter to the White House in 1994. People can find it at phi-beta-iota.net. Just look up 1994 sounding the alarm. I wrote the first letter, co-signed by 3 other people, including the top NSA security engineer, and we were ignored. And NSA then turned around and gutted security. In fact, the intel inside is a joke. It's actually a play on words. Okay. There are backdoors in everything. And I mean, I think people are stupid to have Alexa in their home, for example. The day is going to come when Alexa will call the police because you said something Alexa didn't like.
That's insane. Now, the fact that they're in front of Congress, this is my own skepticism. I don't think Congress will do a damn thing, at least the Congress in place now. I truly believe the Congress has to be wiped clean and we need new elections or something along those lines. How would that work?
I absolutely agree. And Dr. McKinney and I wrote this for President Donald Trump. Okay. And we have been trying to push this on him. And what I was told recently by someone who is twice removed from the White House was that the feeling was that they're very well aware of this because it's the only. I did this based on the work of thousands of others. And I basically extracted, by the way, the cartoons are in English and Spanish. Okay. And what I did was working with the work of thousands of others. I not only identified the 70% that are shut out of our system, but I identified 12 specific things that need to be done in order for election reform to happen. And what I was told was the president didn't feel he could do election reform because it would look as if he was rigging the system for himself. So instead, he rigged the system to catch the fraud. And by the way, the rhinos, the Republicans in name only, including idiots like, not idiots. Romney's a very smart man, but I think he's also done a lot of money laundering. He's probably complicit in some of the Mormon trafficking in children. There's one Mormon cult that is giving birth to babies as a cash crop and selling them for $50,000 each in Turkey, never registered with a birth certificate. So there's some really evil, bad stuff going on, and both parties need to be destroyed. And I think the president is now ready. And what we're trying to do is communicate to the president that Dr. Cynthia McKinney is ready to help deliver Georgia, deliver both Senate seats in Georgia, deliver a Georgia recount, and then serve the president because she's a 6-term former congresswoman. She could be the legislative lead for taking #unrigged to the new Congress And that would guarantee that in 2022, President Trump would have a Congress that represents proportionally independents, libertarians, Greens, Constitution Party, especially Sandinistas. Sandinistas are not communists, they're populists. They're
Tell people about that, because they've heard that word from you. Give them a little background on that.
Sandinistas are the Bernie Sanders followers. They're the progressives that don't drool like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Okay, these are nice, normal people who really want a decent life and so forth. And unfortunately, Bernie Sanders has been a false Pied Piper. He's basically been a slut for Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. And AOC is a crazy waitress that auditioned for the job and is being spoon-fed her lines. In fact, her chief of staff stole not only money, he stole Bernie Sanders' email list. Okay, so bottom line here is I think the president knows full well he needs a completely new Congress. I'm not at all certain where he is on Nasara Gassara and calling for completely new elections and so forth. If I had to guess, I would say he will serve out his 4-year term. He will do 100 special elections and appointments as he cleans out all the rhinos that have endorsed Biden have signed their political death warrant. Okay, they're gone. And that includes Mitt Romney. And then with the new Congress and election reform, now you get to a Congress that has no special interest influence, that can make evidence-based decisions in the public interest. And that's where I come in. What I want is the open source agency that creates the Trump channel, the Trump studio, the Truth channel, an open source agency, a global strategy council. And I got to say, I have nothing but absolute praise for the people that the president has put into the Department of Defense recently. These guys are rock stars. And to have them come out and say, we're going to end all wars, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, people don't realize, I mean, what that means. It's so funny because I've always been a professional wrestling fan. And I love when you say this is the WrestleMania playbook, because, by the way, President Trump is very good friends with Vince McMahon and a couple others.
Well, let me give Matt Taibbi the credit for that insight. Again, I'm nothing without all these people whose books I'm reading. I connect dots and people, but I absorb stuff. And I'm also very lucky because I'm a magnet. People send me stuff knowing that I'm interested and I'm kind of a focal point. But in his book, Hate Inc., and by the way, Matt Taibbi wrote Griftopia and he wrote The Divide. Those are two very, very important books. Griftopia was about the merger of political and financial crime in the United States of America. And this is what Donald Trump is taking down. But in his book, Hate Inc., he said Trump communicates with the world as if it were a WrestleMania drama. And I'm absolutely convinced that Biden, Pelosi, Schumer are all reading lines from a script, and they're the designated heel, the designated loser. And the reason they're cooperating with President Trump is because if they don't, they will go to jail for life.
They don't like that idea. That is not. Do you think now he has the Senate? He obviously won. He probably gets the House as well, overwhelmingly. You think these House elections will be overturned as well, along with this?
I don't know, but I'm listening and reading a lot. But what I'm being told is that multiple congressional districts in California were stolen and will be flipped back. Here in Virginia, Senator Warner, I believe, stole the election from Gade because in Virginia is basically three pieces. It's a bunch of techno pussies in the Northeast. And then it's the shipbuilders in the Norfolk area and the military in the Norfolk area. And then it's the rednecks in the Southwest. Okay. And the Southwest and the Norfolk area came out en masse. I think Gade won Virginia by 57%. And I think Senator Warner stole the election from him. And I pray that President Trump's plans include putting Gade into the Senate once the election is shown to have been stolen.
Interesting you say that, because actually election night, I did a live special all the way to like 2:30 in the morning, and Virginia was heavily red, and then all of a sudden it started flipping right around that same exact time that they stopped counting other states. And I said, well, this is really weird. It's red. I didn't expect that. But then when it flipped, it didn't really make sense.
I think it was theft. And by the way, I think Jerry Connolly was also defeated. That's my district. Jerry Connolly in my district was challenged by a woman of an American woman of Indian descent. The Indians are like the Pashtuns. When they want to vote for somebody, they shit votes. Okay. I think she brought out the entire Northern Virginia Indian American community. And I think she beat Jerry Connolly. And again, he stole the election from her. That has to be properly investigated. But I think that that Fairfax County went red. And eventually, my goal is to eliminate the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, which right now is destroying Confederate monuments and also passing gun laws. They just outlawed guns in nature reserves where bears have been seen in the last year.
Which is completely illogical because at that point it's survival. You would have to have something with you.
I cannot overstate the stupidity or corruption of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors on these 2 points. They do a lot of good work, but on these and Confederate monuments are sacred. Okay, the South fought a war of secession, not a civil war. The North fought a civil war because they wanted to loot the South. And anybody who doesn't understand that is a goddamn idiot that should go back to school.
Well, there's a lot of people that need to go back to school because our whole history has to be rewritten.
Well, you make a good point. One of the things about the open source agency is it would be a nuclear powered re-education program for the public. And the Trump studio would be doing 7-minute videos on everything. And it would have 10,000 people doing videos. So on poverty, on infectious disease, on agriculture, on water, on 5G, on glyphosate, on Monsanto as a criminal agency. The university system has gone into a cesspool, and we literally need to rebuild America. We need to start teaching civics and music and art and physical fitness. There is a lot to be done, and I envision the open source agency as something that will reboot education, intelligence as decision support, and research. We're spending trillions of dollars in DOD and energy and elsewhere creating evil shit. That money should be creating peace and prosperity stuff. And I really think the new team at DOD is to die for.
It's interesting you say that because it all goes together. As I was telling my friend earlier today, who does a lot of finance work with me, gold, silver, a little bit of speculation in crypto. And I said, if Trump gets this done correctly, this economy next year will absolutely skyrocket out of, I mean, if you put the workers back to productivity and creativity, like his vision is of his own empire, this place, and if you back, because I watched your video with, I believe it was Jim Willie, if you back these currencies by gold, silver, commodities, etc., people don't even understand how good this economy will transcend anything we've ever seen before.
Well, let me give you a couple of data points. Now, first off, 3 data points. The first is, and Charles, I'm a huge fan of Charles Hugh Smith, and he wrote an excellent article on how COVID-19 basically eliminated the fraud economy. What we've done essentially with all these lockdowns is demonstrated that we don't need 50 million cubicle rats. Okay. Now, what do these good people do? So the second data point is, I believe that the president is going to get all of the money that he needs to literally offer every single American that needs a job paid training in 3 areas. And a friend of mine, Del Spurlock, wrote the DOD labor plan under Ronald Reagan for retraining the entire workforce, the entire American public for the 21st century. And it wasn't implemented, but that plan is still there and still valid. People need to be trained in advanced information technology and related things. They need to be trained in localized, self-sustainable agriculture and manufacturing that is not controlled by the deep state. And last but not least, we can create a whole bunch of open source everything engineering manufacturing plants. And what that does is it allows every state and county to be self-sufficient in water, energy, food, and health. And then it creates an export industry. Because right now you have people who are using children and water buffaloes to till farm fields because they cannot afford a $250,000 John Deere tractor. but a village could afford a $25,000 tractor, such as has been built by my friend Marcin Jakubowski at Open Source Ecology. He's got the Global Village construction set, which is absolutely a thing of beauty. He's one of the people whose shoulders I stand on. So there is an awful lot of good things that can be done. Now, here's my third and last data point. Wall Street has been held back by the fact that all the smart people know that Wall Street is a den of thieves. And so the smart entrepreneurs and inventors and stuff no longer go to Wall Street for money because they know that the placement firms will conspire with the naked short sellers to screw them over and then destroy the company. If you take the crime out of Wall Street, you will triple the stock market in the second 4 years of Donald Trump's term. That may be an overstatement, but you will boom the stock market, because what people are waiting for is a demonstration that Wall Street will not be allowed to commit financial crimes with impunity, such as Eric Holder, a member of the Covington and Burlington firm that screwed Mike Flynn out of $3.5 million while conspiring with the Department of Justice to screw Flynn. Eric Holder took jail off the table for Wall Street crime. We need to put jail back on the table. And I think if President Trump can get $100 trillion and also the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, that's a RICO organization. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, that's a RICO organization. The Senate Banking Committee is a RICO organization. All three of those people need to be brought in and said, listen, asshole, you're going to stop this shit or we're going to kill you.
Yeah, I believe the SEC head just stepped down yesterday, correct?
I don't know. There's a lot to be said. You know, I would like Barr to succeed. There's an awful lot to be said for taking someone who intimately understands the deep state players and methods and stuff and then flipping them so that they become part of your inside team. I personally, I'm not sure I can trust Barr, and I'm not sure I can trust Giuliani. Giuliani was hired by the Zionists, the globalists, the Red Mafia, to eliminate the Italian FBI so that the Jewish mafia could take over. The Brofmans, the Les Wexners of the world. Okay,
I'm convinced Giuliani knew what 9/11 was, personally.
It's very likely. Remember now that the Twin Towers were owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey until July. And I have written these things here, which people can get free. Okay, these are both free. And the two tiny URLs are Steele-false flags and 911-POTUS. There is no question in my mind that Giuliani is probably a co-conspirator after the fact. He may well have been a conspirator before the fact because he appears to have been instrumental in arranging for all of the dump trucks with GPS transponders before the fact. I don't know. It needs to be properly investigated. Certainly, we know that Larry Silverstein and Greenberg from AIG and probably the governors of New York and New Jersey and the heads of Port Authority and certainly the New York City building standards people all knew. And in this thing here, which brings together 26 different authors, there's one guy who was a member of the architectural team that documented the condemning of the Twin Towers in 1987. The planning for 9/11 started in 1987. Netanyahu wrote about it in 1994. I think Cheney and Netanyahu were briefed on it in 1990. And I think that Bill Cheney was the guy who made it happen, was the enabler for the globalists to actually take down the Twin Towers and put a missile or whatever into the Pentagon. It was not an airplane, and no airplanes went into the Twin Towers either. Right. But we're getting there. I think the president will do 9/11 and Epstein disclosure after he is reinaugurated.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, because see, Epstein leads straight into pedophilia and empire.
Right.
Okay. This is big, big stuff. And if people go to pedoempire.org, you've got a tag cloud there that names names.
Now, you brought up New York, and I'm going to tell you, every day I watch this show happening, I get closer, and I'm a pretty skeptical person when it comes to this topic, but I'm getting closer and closer to truly believing that JFK Jr. set this whole thing up with Trump 20 years ago and that he is going to pop out of the shadows. I wasn't believing it. And then I heard you say the 80%, which we've talked about before. And then as this goes deeper, I'm like, as I read Q drops, and then I read about I read Carrie Cassidy and Project Camelot, which I know you talked with her. I'm like, it is very possible that he has been behind the scenes this whole time.
Well, first off, I think Donald Trump is the culmination or the reversal of the JFK assassination. And Cynthia McKinney and I were on the Sargent report, and she was talking about how important it is for the president to release the JFK thing. However, I've reviewed 15 books in one video, and people can go to phi-beta-iota.net and search for JFK reviews and get to those reviews. There's no question but that the CIA and the FBI co-conspired to assassinate President Kennedy, along with Lyndon Baines Johnson and the Secret Service, which betrayed JFK. Now, I did an analysis of the JFK Jr. shootdown, and I was deeply impressed by the fact that the aircraft door was tucked inside of the airplane and that the passenger seat was missing and that the bodies were rapidly cremated, so on. So I've published a post. If people go to phi-beta-iota.net and look up JFK 80%, they'll get to the post. I recently sat down for lunch with Juan O. Savin, which is not his real name. He's a very gifted individual. And I asked him outright. And I also have someone who went to school with JFK Jr. who says he's alive. So I don't know, but I believe that the probabilities are 80% or better. And that could be one of the things that Trump is counting on to neutralize the progressive left, because you cannot argue with John F. Kennedy Jr. coming out and saying, all of these people are dirty. Let's do a fresh start.
And it restores the Kennedy Democrat, which was actually a sane Democrat.
Yes, it does.
I mean, I went back and I watched. It's on YouTube.
Let me point out that John F. Kennedy Jr. will be 64 in 2024, which is a very good age to be president, particularly if he has Cynthia McKinney as his vice president.
Interesting. There's actually there's a great video from a 1961, I think, debate between Nixon and Kennedy that I was watching on YouTube. And they both actually sound like real Americans during that debate. They weren't mean. There was no like back and forth yelling at each other. It was actually how we build America correctly.
Well, you're right. And let me also point out that there are some people that believe that JFK stole the election from Nixon. And there's a really brilliant man, Edwin Vieira. He's a PhD and also a JD. And I've posted an interview with him, and he really says something very, very important. He says Nixon made a mistake in conceding to Kennedy, knowing that Cook County in Illinois had been stolen and flipped the election. Now, I think Kennedy proved to be very interesting. Never mind that he liked to bang 3 women at a time while he was on the road. But what Vieira says is, which is the greater crime? To steal an election with fraud, or to concede an election knowing that it was stolen by fraud? And that's the thinking behind President Trump's, absolutely, apart from the fact that Trump's a genius and he's got this all set, is the president cannot concede without violating his constitutional oath to defend and protect.
Absolutely. So before we head out, I have a last question for you, because I've only seen you talk on this once, and I've done a lot of reading on Bill Cooper. Bill Cooper was one of just Behold a Pale Horse.
Oh yes. I still haven't read that book, but everything I've seen, including extracts, suggests that it is one of the basic references in the world. Now, what do you want to ask? Because I'm not competent on that book.
Well, and that it was interesting. I saw you interview, I believe it's Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot, and I've been fascinated by the ET UFO thing for the longest time, because I truly do believe Kennedy was partly assassinated because he asked for direct information. I could be wrong on that, but he was
assassinated for 9 different reasons. And one of the things that's come out as I've been looking into this and talking to people, including Roger Stone and Danny Sheehan, is that the 9 different people that were trying to assassinate Kennedy didn't trust anyone else. So there were 9 different shooters. I mean, it was a goat rope. So look, I have an open mind. I have no direct knowledge about the extraterrestrial program. I flew to France to meet an alleged extraterrestrial and came away unimpressed. What did it for me was the idea that Einstein and Tesla say everything is energy.
Right.
And then I look at people like David Icke and John Rappaport who talk about how we're all just software code. We're all energy in different forms. And humanity is an experiment in free will and imagination. I don't know. All I know is that in this life, at this time, I just try and be the best person I can. But Trump is very intimately familiar with Tesla, as is Juan O. Savin. And I believe we're going to see stellar civilization and secret space program disclosure immediately after or soon after the re-election. And that is going to put out free energy, anti-gravity, anti-aging, and being able to clone limbs. My fondest dream for the Department of Defense is that in the second Trump administration, it is able to offer every veteran amputee a cloned limb.
That would be
rather
amazing.
than a claw.
That would be that. I mean, that alone to help our veterans and to help them with the mental health aspect and the PTSD. I mean, that would be a gigantic victory for the entire country, just helping them with that. I mean, I know how much they suffer with that.
Well, and they also suffer from neglect. I mean,
Right.
If I were God, there wouldn't be an unemployed veteran. That's a contradiction in terms.
Totally. I agree. Robert, before we go, what is your parting message to the Americans? You have 1,600 people viewing, and this is going to go out to 10,000 plus. What is your message? What do you see as we go into this next couple months? Because it's going to be storm time.
Well, let me make an appeal and then the message. The appeal is, please, everybody, tweet the president and copy at Cynthia McKinney and say, Mr. President, she said you won big, you won black, you won Georgia. Why are you not talking to this goddess? Okay, so help me connect the president to Cynthia McKinney. My message for the public is have faith that the goodness of America has come to the top.
I love it. I love how concise you are, Robert. I love how in other interviews people will drag on and on and on, and Robert is just concise. My wife heard you, and she's like he's very like forward. I go, I think he's a former spy. He doesn't mess around. It's just to the point, and it's over.
Well, I mean, let me be humble. The most important skill in spying is typing. It's 4 hours typing for every hour of agent meeting. But yes, I am the only former spy, top nonfiction reviewer, founder of the Marine Corps Intelligence Agency, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and I still can't get the president to listen to me.
That's okay. Where can everyone find you? What are your websites?
RobertDavidSteele.com, period.
Got it. I love it. Robert, I appreciate you being on again. You're awesome. You're a patriot. You're a warrior. Everyone share this as much as you can. We get this word out. The more we do this, the faster the awakening happens. This is Dr. Jason Dean, Robert David Steele, Revolution Network. You guys have an amazing, amazing day. Take care.